Look, I have been teaching combat methodology at the Dexerin Military Institute for 17 cycles now. 17 cycles of watching cadets fumble through basic strike patterns, 17 cycles of correcting stances, 17 cycles of wondering why the Galactic Council keeps sending the species that could not fight their way out of a protein-said emphasis chamber. But this human situation, this was going to be entertaining in ways I had not anticipated. The human's name was Marcus Webb. Yes, Webb. Not so dramatic designation, not a complicated identifier with apostrophes and throat clicks, just Webb. He stood in my gymnasium at exactly 0600 hours, 3 minutes before class assembly, wearing the standard issue training suit that somehow looked entirely wrong on his bipedal frame, too tight across the shoulders, too loose at the joint. Everything about a human seemed like a biological mistake wrapped in overconfidence. His file sat on my data tablet, glowing with red priority markers. Homeworld designate 1 Earth. Gravity 1.03 standard. Atmospheric composition 78% nitrogen, 21% oxygen. The planet was classified, and I am not making this up, as a Class 9 death world. Class 9. The same category as the crew math where it rains sulfuric acid. The same category as the Nox price time where the predators hunt in coordinated packs of 50. I read that designation 3 times, certain there had been a clerical error. Then I looked at Webb again, standing there with his hands loosely at his sides, examining my training equipment with what I can only describe as mild curiosity. This creature from a Class 9 death world looked about as dangerous as a pluvial moss farmer. "Instructor Krell," he said, and his translator rendered my name with perfect inflection. "Permission to ask a question." "Granted," I replied, already regretting it. "Why is the gravity set to 0.75 standard? Is there a malfunction?" Oh good, this was going to be fun. The gravity was not malfunctioning. It was set to accommodate the majority of species in this training cohort. Vexerins, like myself, operated optimally at 0.8. Differing twins in the back row needed 0.65, or their exoskeletons cramped. The gravity was fine for everyone except, apparently, the human who grew up somewhere that should not support multicellular life. "The gravity," I said slowly, "is configured for optimal training conditions." "Understood." Webb nodded once, then proceeded to rock back and forth on his feet, testing the resistance. I watched his leg muscles coil and release, adjusting to the difference with unsettling ease. Most species took days to acclimate to gravity shifts. This human looked like he was deciding whether he preferred tea or coffee. The rest of the class filtered in over the next few minutes, 23 cadets total, representing 12 different species, all here because they scored high enough in aptitude tests to warrant advanced combat training. The 3 Theron twins, Caxton and Vax, clicked their mandibles at Webb, sizing him up. 3 Morganthean females clustered together, whispering in their musical language. A Quellan male named Dorothy made a show of stretching his forearms, each one corded with natural muscle that evolution spent millions of years perfecting. Webb stood alone, hands still loose, watching everyone with eyes that tracked movement like targeting systems. Brown eyes, such a bore in color for organs that seemed to process information at an alarming rate. "Formation," I barked, and 22 cadets snapped into position. Webb took 0.4 seconds longer, but his stance, when he found it, was textbook perfect. Feet shoulder-width apart, weight balanced, center of gravity low. Someone had trained this human before he arrived at my academy. "Today, we begin practical application of Kredel's 3rd methodology," I announced, pacing in front of the formation. "You will demonstrate your ability to respond to unexpected aggression with appropriate counterforce. This is not sparring. This is not exhibition. This is combat assessment." I saw several cadets swallow hard. Good. They should be nervous. Combat assessment meant I would attack them without warning, without mercy, and they would either respond correctly or end up in the medical wing explaining to the healers why they failed to block a strike they absolutely should have seen coming. "Fourth him," I called out. "Center mat." The Quellan moved forward, all forearms flexing in sequence. He was strong, I would give him that. His species evolved in heavy gravity forests, swinging between enormous trees, developing the kind of grip strength that could crush steel. He took his position, and I circled him once, twice, letting anticipation build. Then I struck. A simple straight punch aimed at his thorax. 3 of his arms came up in a defensive weave pattern, while the 4th shot forward in a counterstrike. Inadequate. Not impressive, but adequate. I blocked his counter and stepped back. 72% efficiency, I told him. Your secondary left arm telegraphed her intention 0.3 seconds before execution. In real combat, you would be compromised. Dorthan's skin flushed purple with embarrassment, but he nodded and returned to formation. I worked through 6 more cadets, finding flaws in each one. Caxton relied too heavily on his natural armor plating. One of the Morgantheans had excellent technique, but hesitated 0.2 seconds before committing. A Hepner male named Grix had power but no precision, throwing strikes that would exhaust him in under a minute of sustained combat. Then I called Webb to the center mat. He walked forward with that same unhurried pace. No showboating, no false bravado, just steady movement that covered distance efficiently. He took his position 3 meters from me, and I noticed something odd. His breathing had not changed, not faster from anxiety, not slower from forced calm, just consistent, rhythmic, like his cardiovascular system was designed by engineers who understood optimal oxygen delivery. I decided to make this educational, not just for Webb, but for the entire class. These cadets needed to understand that Death World designation or not, proper combat technique would always prevail over brute biological advantage. I would strike fast, strike hard, and demonstrate exactly why 17 cycles of teaching experience made me the superior combatant. I moved without warning. Without the circling pattern I used with the others, my right hand shot forward in a throat strike that had dropped 2 Morganthean war chiefs, the kind of blow that should have connected before Webb's primitive neural pathways could process the threat and signal his muscles to respond. Should have. His left hand came up, rotated inward, and his fingers wrapped around my wrist with enough pressure to completely arrest my forward momentum. Not blocking, not deflecting. Catch. He caught my strike like someone plucking fruit from a tree, and the kinetic energy I had put into that blow simply disappeared into his biomechanical structure. Time did a very strange thing then. It stretched, taffy-like, while my brain tried to process what my nerve endings were reporting. The human had not moved quickly. He had moved precisely. There was a difference, a critical difference that my 17 cycles of teaching experience suddenly seemed inadequate to explain. His brown eyes met mine, and I saw something in them that made my secondary heart skip a beat. Not aggression, not fear, curiosity. Like he genuinely wanted to know what would happen next. "Instructor Krell," Webb said, his voice perfectly modulated, perfectly calm. "Has class begun?" The gymnasium fell so silent I could hear the ventilation system cycling air through the overhead ducts. 22 cadets stood frozen in formation, their various visual organs locked on the center mat where their instructor's strike was being held in place by a human who seemed entirely unbothered by the situation. I tugged my wrist experimentally. His grip did not loosen or tighten. It simply held, absolute and immovable, like my arm had been locked in a mechanical vise. My muscles strained, and I felt the beginning of real resistance, not from trying to pull free, but from the horrifying realization that I could not pull free, not without escalating to techniques that would be entirely inappropriate for a teaching demonstration. "Release," I said quietly. Webb opened his hand immediately, stepping back to reset his stance. My wrist bore 5 small pressure marks where his fingers had been, already fading but definitely present. I rotated my joint, checking for damage, finding none, but feeling the phantom sensation of that grip like an echo. The class remained silent. I had 2 options. Option 1, acknowledge what just happened and adjust my teaching methodology accordingly. Option 2, pretend this was all part of the lesson plan and maintain the appearance of control over my gymnasium. I chose option 3. "Again," I said. Webb tilted his head slightly, that same curious expression crossing his features. "Instructor, that was the preliminary assessment."
I lied smoothly. Now we test your response to sustained engagement. Defend yourself. I did not give him time to respond. I came in with a combination strike, right hand high, a left hand low, both aimed at legitimate targets, both thrown with the kind of speed that should have overwhelmed his reaction time. Humans had slower neural transmission than Vexorans. This was documented biological fact. Their signals had to travel farther through longer limbs. Their brains had to process visual information through primitive binocular vision. Webb's hands moved in a blur that should not have been possible for his species. He redirected my right strike with a rising forearm block that used my momentum against me, then pivoted his hips to create an angle that made my left strike pass harmlessly through empty space. I found myself off balance, overextended, and he was already resetting to neutral stance.